Alcatraz was renowned as an inescapable prison, boasting one of the world's most stringent security systems. Throughout the history of Alcatraz prison's operation, 36 inmates have attempted to escape, but all have failed. Among them, 23 were captured, 6 were shot dead, 2 drowned, and 5 others went missing. However, only 3 lucky individuals escaped from this prison, the siblings John and Karen and Frankie Morris. And the exact amount of this reward remains a mystery. Today, let us explore together all the mysteries surrounding what is considered the greatest prison escape in world history. Let's explore the reasons why Alcatraz prison is dubbed the world Sea Eagle. The reason is that in the past, Alcatraz Island was inhabited solely by this particular species of bird. In 1934, the U.S. federal government built a prison here to incarcerate the most notorious and dangerous criminals in America. Alcatraz is located just over 2 kilometers from the city of San Francisco and less than a stone's throw from the world-famous Golden Gate Bridge. The invisible barrier preventing the prisoners from escaping was the ocean surrounding the island, with its natural prisons, shoals of great white sharks. The water here flows swiftly, swirls powerfully, and conceals extremely dangerous undercurrents. To prevent prisoners from escaping, the warden of this prison also employs a highly unique method. Every day, they allowed the prisoners to use hot water for laundry, gradually forming an ingrained habit. Public opinion once praised the extremely humane treatment of inmates at Alcatraz prison. But in reality, the prisons had established a routine that made the inmates unable to endure the cold of the seawater surrounding the island. Many escaped prisoners were forced to swim back to shore because they couldn't bear the intensely salty taste of the seawater. The criminals brought to Alcatraz Federal Prison for detention are core members of the Mafia gang, specialists in carrying out bank robberies. Notorious cold-blooded killers often receive life sentences, sometimes even for the remainder of their natural lives. According to some sources, a number of gangsters have sought out Alcatraz as a means to expand and consolidate their spheres of influence in the underworld. There was no protective wall system whatsoever, yet Alcatraz was still known as the inescapable place. Like a cursed circlet, the prisoner has only a way in, but no way out. For a long time, San Francisco Bay has been known as a treacherous body of water due to its frequent, dense fog, even during the daytime. At night, it's nearly impossible to determine which direction to go. In 1854, a lighthouse over 12 meters high was built on Alcatraz Island. Besides the lighthouse, the island also features a large bell used for signaling and warning ships. Alcatraz Island is essentially just the peak of a mountain. San Francisco Bay was a valley tens of millions of years ago. As the sea level receded, this valley became a permanent landmass. Therefore, the island has almost no soil, it's all rock. There are virtually no naturally occurring trees on the island. The few green plants present were mostly brought and cultivated by humans during the prison's construction period. The waters surrounding Alcatraz Island have a very low temperature, only about 4 degrees Celsius. Alcatraz prison is internally divided into 4 separate blocks: A, B, C, and D, which correspond to the assessed moral character of each inmate. When an inmate is brought to Alcatraz, it means he has been deemed unmanageable in all previous prisons. The gentlest ones will be kept in Area A. Similarly, those assigned to Zone D were considered beyond saving. During your rehabilitation at Alcatraz detention camp, if you genuinely show remorse and demonstrate clear progress, inmates in Area D will be transferred to detention zones with better conditions, may even be relocated to mainland prisons, and will have the opportunity to be considered for amnesty. Designed to incarcerate the most notorious criminals in America at that time. Alcatraz, a figure who stands in complete opposition to brutality and severity. Hun Da Tang. It is where particularly dangerous inmates who have committed especially serious crimes are detained. This is the U.S. government's warning to war criminals across the nation. The first rule established by Warden D.M. Johnson at Alcatraz was silence. Prisoners are not allowed to talk to each other or to the guards, except in special circumstances. They were completely isolated from the outside world, even reading books was not permitted. When visitors from the outside came in, they were strictly forbidden from telling the prisoners any information about the outside situation. The guards will monitor all conversations to ensure no one exceeds the permitted limits. If an inmate violates the regulations, they will be transferred to the solitary confinement area for disciplinary offenders. The code of silence pushed many prisoners to the brink of insanity. In this, Rupert Perelman was both a gangster and his direct superior. He chopped off 4 of his own fingers with an iron hammer to be transferred to another prison. Dark Ages. the prison that holds America's most notorious and dangerous criminals, under an extremely strict management and disciplinary regime. The Johnson Silence Rule was lifted in 1937. At Alcatraz, the most dreaded place is the prison block, which contains 42 cells with varying levels of punishment. For inmates who violate the rules, they were forced to strip off all their clothes and were only provided with substandard meals. In that dark room, there wasn't even a toilet, just a single basin of water for washing up. There was only a small hole in the floor to serve as a toilet. Prisoners held here are forced to live in complete darkness all day and are only given a thin blanket at night. They were deprived of all sensory stimulation as well as comfortable amenities. The penalty is typically applied for a period of 1 to 2 days, however, there are also cases of heavier penalties of up to 19 days. Some cells in the prison block have views overlooking the San Francisco Bay, as if to console the incarcerated, having lost freedom and connections with the outside world. According to statistics, over a span of 29 years, 36 inmates were involved in 14 unsuccessful prison escape plots. The group included 2 individuals who had planned 2 escape attempts, 23 who were recaptured, and 6 who were shot dead during the escape. 5 people were reported missing. One of the most famous events in Arkansas history is the 1946 prison escape of inmate Bernard Coy. Noticing that the gap between the bars in the guardroom was quite wide, enough to crawl through, Coy lost approximately 9 kilograms for the role. On May 2, 1946, Coy and 5 of his accomplices attacked and knocked a guard unconscious. He stole the man's keys and sneaked into the gun storage room. The plan failed because Coy was discovered, but he still barricaded himself in the gunroom. For the next 48 hours, Coy kept firing at the sentries. Left with no other choice, the army had to throw grenades into the room where he was hiding in order to advance. By May 4, they were placed in a detention cell, and 3 of the 6 prisoners were sentenced to death. The incident left 12 soldiers wounded and 2 others dead. 16 years later, 3 inmates of the next generation at Alcatraz prison carried out a shocking escape that made world history. That was the mysterious escape of 3 inmates, including the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, and their friend Frank Morris. On the night of June 11, 1962, 3 inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, escaped from prison. Successfully escaped from Alcatraz. As of this moment, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, has still been unable to identify them, and the warrants for their arrest remain active. Frank Morris was born on January 21, 1926, in Washington, D.C. At the age of 13, Morris was arrested for drug possession and armed robbery. At the age of 18, just a few days after leaving the reform school, Morris was involved in another robbery in the harbor area. In the city of Miami, a major city in the state of Florida. Sentenced to 15 years in prison and incarcerated in a Louisiana state penitentiary, Morris escaped after serving 10 years of his sentence. 1 year after his escape, Morris broke into a San Francisco-based automotive industry billionaire's mansion with the intent to steal valuables. He continued to be detained, and this time, Morris was sent to Alcatraz prison under inmate number Arizona 1441. Like Frank Moritz, both John Anglin, born May 2, 1930, and his brother Carolyn Anglin, born May 11, 1931, had a checkered past. At just 14 years old, John persuaded Carolyn to take part in robbing a nearby store, but neither of them faced criminal charges. Since it was almost closing time, the shops had already moved all their money down to the safe in the basement, so the robber didn't get a single cent. The gun they used in the robbery was just a child's toy. At the age of 28, John once again asked Carolyn to rob a store near the Columbia area in Alabama. In this arrest, John was sentenced to 15 years in prison, while Carolyn received a 20-year sentence for possessing and using a Thompson submachine gun. After serving time at the L.A. Wynwood State Prison in Florida, both were taken to Alcatraz Federal Prison with the prisoner numbers AS 1476 and AZ 1485, respectively. In the Alcatraz prison break, we cannot fail to mention another key figure, Alan Webb, born March 25, 1929. In 1955, Webb was convicted of car theft and consequently sent to prison. At the Florida State Prison, Webb plotted an escape but was discovered, and was subsequently transferred to Alcatraz prison with inmate number AS 1385. When Moritz and the Anglin brothers began their escape, Webb joined them. However, at the final, decisive moment, he changed his mind and stayed behind. Webb was once again arrested and sentenced to an additional 20 years in prison, all for the crime of theft. Despite having moved to Alcatraz multiple times at different points, a twist of fate always prevented Moritz from staying. The Anglin and Webb brothers were held in adjacent cells. Moritz's escape plan began to take shape in early December 1961, when he accidentally discovered some broken iron plowshares during a casual stroll around the prison yard. At the time of the prison break, the FBI's investigation determined that these saw blades were used by the very ironworkers who were repairing the security fence. An incident involving the improper disposal of waste in a non-designated area occurred within the special detention zone for highly dangerous inmates. After nearly 3 months of exercising while surveying the terrain and key features during field outings under the scorching 8 o'clock sun, by mid-February 1962. At mealtime, Moritz deliberately sought a seat at the same table as the Anglin brothers, for he knew that without these accomplices, the escape plan would be impossible to pull off. For the only way to escape Alcatraz was to dig a tunnel directly beneath the head of the bed. Enter the rooftop ventilation shaft, then use it to cross the barbed wire fence and the jagged rocky ledge number 1. The location of the freshwater tank for the daily use of the monks. Adjacent to the saltwater basin meant freedom, but if the Anglin brothers did not participate, the noise from the tunneling would surely be detected and reported by the prison guards. Birds of a feather flocked together, so when Moritz presented the escape plan, the Anglin brothers immediately rallied behind it. Not only that, but they also proposed inviting West to join, since his cell was located right next to Carolyn's. And just like the Anglin brothers, West immediately agreed. A stroke of luck came to the escapees when John and Clarence Anglin were assigned to clean up the prison garden. Inside the broken motor of a vacuum cleaner, a piece of steel shaped exactly like a drill bit was found. For the following 6 months, every night when the cells were locked and the guards had withdrawn to their duty stations, Moritz pulled out the sliding bed once more, opening the steel plate that covered the ventilation hole right at the head of the bed. Then, using the broken drill bit and saw blade, he chiseled and widened the brick layer to create a gap wide enough for the knife handle to fit through. In the next room, Anglin played the accordion to cover up the noise. When the guards conduct an unannounced inspection, the area will signal by stopping play. After installing the iron grate over the vent, Moritz climbed into bed and lay down, pretending to be fast asleep. And since the ventilation system at Alcatraz is composed of multiple main ducts with a diameter of 1.6 meters, each main duct is further subdivided into numerous smaller branch ducts. This 0.8-meter diameter tunnel leads directly into the prison cells. By simply breaking through the wall separating the auxiliary pipe and the iron grate, the prisoner was able to crawl through the pipe to escape. Stay away from the main pipeline. All the broken bricks and shattered concrete generated during the chiseling process were hidden by the group of prisoners in the cavities between the walls and the pipes. Just before dawn, as roll call was about to begin, they camouflaged the hole in the wall with pieces of cardboard. Then, insert the iron bars into their correct positions and pull the bed back to its original location. To deal with unexpected nighttime inspections, Moritz and the Anglin brothers devised a plan to distract the guards by setting fires. From strands of hair collected in the prison barbershop, crushed cardboard, glue made from bread soaked in water, toilet paper, toothpaste, and soap, they created 4 fake human heads identical in size to real ones. According to the plan, on the night of the prison transfer, each person would rest their head on the edge of the bed, with their clothes and other miscellaneous items placed beneath it. Then he pulled the blanket up over his face, under the electric light spilling from the corridor, in case a guard came to check. They would not be able to recognize that the prisoner sleeping on the bed over there was actually just a decoy. The final obstacle for the escapees was the sea route from Alcatraz to the shore, with the shortest distance being 16 kilometers. In the last 3 months, they had obtained 50 raincoats by begging, buying, or stealing them from other prisoners. Those raincoats were assembled by Moritz and the Anglin brothers into a raft, with a width of 1.8 meters and a length of 4.3 meters. The hot steam pipe used for heating in winter is located near the ventilation duct. And the cakes of boot polish stolen from the glove-making workshop in the monastery helped them caulk this raft. Finally, on the night of December 11th, in the early hours of December 12, 1962, they began to execute their escape plan. They used pillows, clothes, and a dummy head to arrange into the shape of a sleeping person, facing the wall to deceive the guards. After about 15 minutes, the group finally found the entrance to the main ventilation shaft. Inside the cylindrical shaft is a staircase leading directly to the rooftop, where the air intake vent is located. However, as he prepared to step onto the stairs, Alan Webb suddenly changed his mind and no longer wished to flee. Later, Webb recounted that upon seeing the expression on Moritz's face, he immediately knew his opponent intended to kill him to cover his tracks. Therefore, I was forced to swear upon my parents' lives that I would remain silent upon returning to my cell. Half an hour later, Moritz and the Anglin brothers were finally able to climb from the roof down to the cell block roof by shimmying along a 30-meter-high water pipe. They then continued along the 15-meter-high water pipeline to descend to the ground, before crossing two 3.7-meter-high barbed wire fences. Finally, they reached the water tower located right by the seashore. Here, they assembled the raft, then used the air pump from the accordion that John Anglin had previously removed to inflate it. According to the plan, the escapees would use a raft to reach Anglin Island, located 16 kilometers from Alcatraz prison, in order to avoid the strong ocean currents. They crossed the bay to the opposite shore of Accordion, then continued across the Rockhorn Strait to land in Marin County. After reaching the shore, they would find a way to steal a car, break into a clothing store to get new outfits, and then part ways, each going their separate path. At 3:15 a.m. on June 12, 1962, an escape attempt was discovered when prison guards conducted the routine prisoner head count. A red alert was immediately issued, and the permission for prisoners to work in glove manufacturing workshops, carpentry workshops, and mechanical workshops was also revoked. Even prisoners assigned to work in the kitchen or laundry were forced to remain in their cells. During the search, it was not difficult to determine that West was the main culprit, as he was unable to conceal the evidence. The hole drilled in the back of the iron mesh covering the ventilation duct could not be restored to its original state. According to West's testimony, the FBI had learned of the escape route, the car theft plan, and the plot to rob clothing from Moritz and the Anglin brothers. At 8 a.m., 12 California Coast Guard patrol boats, along with 3 helicopters, conducted a search operation in the waters around Alcatraz prison, extending out to the San Francisco Bay. On the other hand, while officially issuing the red notice, the FBI also secretly established a surveillance system at the residences of the family members of Moritz, Zone, and Carolyn. By June 14, the helicopter had detected a wooden plank originating from the supply packages sent by the Gangte Manufacturing Company to the prison for the purpose of camouflage. According to the FBI's speculation, the group of prisoners used that wooden plank as a seat on the raft. Also that day, the crew of a fishing boat recovered a wallet. Inside are images, names, and addresses of some relatives belonging to Zone Anglin. On June 21, the FBI recovered pieces of a raincoat that had washed ashore near the Kong Vang Bridge. That afternoon, an Arkansas prison boat found a small raft made from raincoats, 46 meters from the prison's location, but the escapees were still missing, without a trace. According to the FBI, it is highly likely that Moritz and the Anglin brothers died because the seawater temperature at the time was too cold, at only about 7 degrees Celsius. Merchants at the scene indicated that they possessed similar equipment to the prison break group. The victims were ultimately swept out into the Pacific Ocean by the current, exhausted from hunger, cold, and the searing spiciness of the chili peppers. This argument was further strengthened when, on July 17, 1962, a Navy cargo ship named the SS Noseawful was en route to Canada. A body was discovered floating on the water, in a location 32 kilometers northwest of the Kong Vang Bridge. According to the sailors' accounts, the body was wearing a pair of long trousers made from denim, a fabric typically used to make prisoner uniforms. But during the recovery and identification of the body, it was determined to be that of Philip Herman, a 34-year-old unemployed baker. He had jumped off the Kong Vang Bridge to commit suicide. Moreover, for an entire month following the prison break, not a single theft was reported at clothing stores or from cars in San Francisco and the surrounding areas. However, there is still a hypothesis that the criminal group staged a fake drowning scene to mislead the investigation. In January 1965, an informant told the FBI that Clarence Anglin was now living in Brazil. However, according to the agents, in this country, no trace of him was found. In 1967, a horse racer in Maryland told the FBI that he had been Maurice's neighbor for the past 5 years. However, it turned out to be just a hoax. The most notable detail is that in 1964, every Christmas, the Anglin family would receive a postcard. Sometimes he signed as Jerry, sometimes as Jerry and Joe. Those were the childhood nicknames of John Anglin and Clarence Anglin. In 1989, at their father's funeral, the Anglin brothers noticed the presence of 2 unfamiliar men. Joe stood before the coffin for a few minutes, then turned and walked away, leaving everything behind. January 12, 2018, marked the 56th anniversary of the Alcatraz prison massacre. The San Francisco Police Department in California unexpectedly released a handwritten letter believed to be from John Anglin. 2. Richmond City Police Department, 2013. The letter stated that after his escape, John had lived for many years in Ceto, Oregon, and for 8 years in North Dakota. Based on the postmark on the envelope, it can be determined that at the time the letter was written, John was living in Southern California. According to the letter, both Moritz and Corrigan passed away between 2005 and 2008. The content of the letter was recorded as follows. I am John Anglin, the one who, along with Clarence Anglin and Frank Morris, carried out the escape from Alcatraz prison in June 1962. I am 83 years old now, my body withered and worn down by the torment of cancer. If you, specifically the police force, have an official announcement on television stating, I will not have to return to the detention camp and will be guaranteed health care. I am prepared to provide the exact address of my residence. This is a serious matter, not something to joke about. According to information from the San Francisco police, after receiving the letter, both the California State Police and the FBI spent 5 long years pursuing leads on John Anglin, but ultimately came up empty-handed. David Whitner, the nephew of the Anglin brothers, confirmed that his grandmother, who was also the mother of John Anglin and Clarence Anglin, once received birthday cards from an uncle named John and roses from an uncle named Clarence. Recently, facial recognition software from a company in Iceland, after processing a series of data, identified what is believed to be an image of the Anglin brothers in a photograph taken in Brazil, 13 years after they escaped from an Arkansas prison. After analyzing the 1975 photograph featuring 2 long-haired men wearing sunglasses, the system confirmed they were indeed John and Corrigan with 99.7% accuracy. However, aside from that announcement, there has been no further verified information or evidence of the Anglin brothers' presence in Brazil after their escape. Numerous clues and many theories have been put forward. However, it must be acknowledged that to this day, the silence from the Arkansas prison remains the very element that makes this escape of the 3 inmates all the more mysterious and fuels public curiosity. Regardless, these prison breaks have left both the police and the public scrambling for clues, putting forward one theory after another. Did they drown or did they successfully escape? To this day, it remains an unanswered question. Another interesting point is that although the Arkansas State Penitentiary is notorious as one of America's most feared prisons, the living conditions there are generally not as bad as one might think. For example, the prison food was relatively ample, with dishes such as bacon, roast pork, and sponge cake. Prisoners could eat as much as they wanted. The cells here are quite small, so each one can only hold a single inmate. In prison, having a private cell is something inmates always desire, as it helps minimize their risk of being attacked by those around them. Because the waters around San Francisco Bay are relatively cold, prisoners were allowed to bathe in moderately hot water. If they escaped, they would be unlikely to endure the frigid temperature of the ocean water outside. Good operating conditions are a camouflage shell meant to enhance security and the ability to detain prisoners. Many soldiers stationed in Arkansas decided to settle on the island itself. They brought their families to live there, and as a result, many children grew up alongside America's most notorious criminals. According to estimates, over 100 children spent their childhoods in Arkansas prisons. Despite living in exceptional circumstances, they still had moments of happiness with games like baseball, kite flying, or roller skating. The prison also has a recreation area with a pool table and a jukebox. The difference when living on the island is that whenever the alarm sounds, the children must immediately run straight home. T revolves solely around Salim. All inmates were required to work, because if left idle, they would easily become despondent, turn aggressive, and cause trouble for the administration. In prison, there are many types of work, but assigning a suitable task to each inmate is no small challenge. The primary reason stems from the fact that, when they were in society, they themselves lacked